We celebrate today a great evangelist, St. Luke, an author of 2 books of the New Testament, the Gospel that bears his name, and its 2nd volume, the Acts of the Apostles. He's deeply shaped our theology and culture, but biographical detail on him is lacking. His name barely appears in the New Testament. What can we learn about this man? What kind of disciple was he? As we heard in our first reading, one of the few mentions, St. Paul calls him a loyal companion. He said, "Luke alone is with me." They worked closely, they journeyed together. Paul also describes Luke in one place, interestingly, as his beloved physician. Luke, it seems, was a doctor. He was undoubtedly a highly educated man. We know he was from Antioch, a city famed in antiquity for learning, for education. And we know too from his writings that he writes very sophisticated Greek. And the power of his storytelling in his works is evident everywhere. Some of the stories that Luke alone records are those that stick most in our imagination. Think of Zacchaeus up the tree, Martha and Mary hosting Jesus in their home, the pair of disciples on the road to Emmaus. And the power of Luke's storytelling is everywhere. But I think the place where we hear his own voice come through clearest is in the prologue to his Gospel, 4 short verses where he tells us what he intends to write. He addresses Theophilus, his reader. How did he understand his own role then as an evangelist, as a disciple? Luke begins by telling us about his method. He consults sources and eyewitnesses. He investigates everything carefully. He writes down an orderly account. But the most significant line, I think, is the final one. Luke says to Theophilus that he writes, "so that you may have certainty concerning the things you have been taught." This is a bold aim, to give the reader certainty about the things of God. Is Luke overpromising? Is he too confident? Surely to believe, to have faith, necessarily excludes certainty. And if we were to put this question to St. Thomas, he would perhaps unsurprisingly say, well, yes and no. Faith does exclude certainty because the object of our faith in this life always remains unseen. On earth, we will never see God face to face with perfect clarity. And so the ordinary knowledge will always exclude us, that kind of certainty we have from ordinary human ways of knowing. However, St. Thomas also says there is a kind of certainty that belongs to faith, namely one given by God. Grace works in the believer to strengthen our assent, to provide a conviction that no natural knowledge could ever offer. St. Thomas speaks here of a kind of mental unrest that belongs to believing. There's both the searching and the questioning about the things of God, and then the deep conviction that God alone provides. What kind of certainty then is St. Luke offering in his Gospel? Is he overconfident? Today's Gospel that we just heard offers, I think, a wonderful model of what St. Luke thinks he is doing. Christ sends out the 70 with a very clear purpose. They're to go ahead of him in 2s into every town and place where he himself was about to come. It's the role of St. John the Baptist, the role the prophet Isaiah tells us: prepare the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Luke himself does not make us certain, but his words prepare us for Christ. The gift of faith belongs to God alone to give. The certainty, the conviction that accompanies faith is the work of grace, and not any human argument. Not even the finest rhetoric, the most powerful storytelling can make us believe. The preacher cannot force anyone to believe or make them certain. It's much like you cannot make a friend fall in love. But you can arrange a date and set them up. And so too, you can tell the story of Jesus Christ and prepare the way for someone to encounter him. God wants us to share in his work of salvation. The confidence of St. Luke shows us how. The task of the preacher, of the Christian, is to go to every town and to every place where he himself is to come. Because Jesus says to every human heart, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock." Have we lit the fire inside?